And if it is true,
Not yet.
and if it is true we are alone together, the way blades of grass are alone, but exist as a field. Rosemary Watola Traumer.
Thank you, readers, very much. So now, just before we go to get the recording going, we have the wonderful opportunity of letting me quickly introduce Rebecca. She has an amazing bio. She is really a wonderful, gifted organizer, somebody born to an organizer, which is always so moving. And in addition to that, she is currently on the faculty at the Urban Studies Department and founder of the Community and Worker Ownership Project at CUNY. She started off as a carpenter way back in the days, and was, I think, one of the original founders of the women in the Carpenters Union. She's dedicated a lot of her time to the building up at 53 Prestwick West, where she brought all of her carpentry skills and building skills to work. She's on the Bronx Cooperative Development Initiative. She's with the Astoria Workers Project and the Brooklyn Communities Collaborative. When I say there's so much more to say about Rebecca, but she really is in the thick of it, and I'm so proud to have her come here today and tell us something about the solidarity economy. Come up, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So happy to be here. Get out my notes. I'm going to take off my name tag for the camera, and I'm going to introduce myself with a visual description as well as in the spirit of full inclusion for those who may be visually impaired. Rebecca, I'm about 5'9", dark curly hair, Caucasian, wearing some dark wide rimmed glasses. And sorry, I've got some distraction on my phone. Flowery shirt, happy to be here. I wanted to do that as a visual description, which is a norm that's used in some circles, particularly disabled community, but we all are temporarily able-bodied if we are not disabled at this moment. So I want to shout out to that. Closed captioning is really important for our events. And as we experience the post-COVID era days, we now are figuring out how to do hybrid, which is an opportunity to have more inclusion. So we have about 15 people in the room. I'm happy for that. It looked like we had about 30 people on Zoom. That's really exciting because this lets people come to us in different ways. And when I start to speak about the solidarity economy, and I know we'll put the slides up in a second, it's really about what those quotes all said. How do we all show up together? So I'm going to speak about that, and Tachi, you can put the first slide that just is my name. And if you can put, yeah, thank you, Damon, putting the caption at the top for those in the room. I'm only a little nervous because that is normal when you're doing public speaking, but also coming into this new space and figuring out these things, going hybrid, planning our program. In the before days, we had certain rituals and processes that we're trying to apply now. So I think we'll be okay. But what I want to do is really invite people to give feedback. You can either put it in the chat later, or you can come up to me or Damon or Tachi or anybody I may be leaving out, Vandra, Pat's in the room. We're working on getting things up and going better and stronger for this new era. So the society is very old. And some of us are, and some more old than others. Vandra turning 77 today. And some of us are young. I want to shout out to the artwork in the room that's got a lot of young people's work. So the solidarity economy, you can go to the next slide, and I'll just say next when it's time, and try not to always look up behind me. A lot of people think when I said I was going to do this platform, there was a kind of a, what I understood, people didn't know what I was talking about. So let me say that the word economy is ancient. It comes from Greeks. It's really about care for the home. That's what it is how do we care for the home? And the home being the earth is great, and how we care for it, it could be with a lot of love. And actually, if I said nothing else today, it would just be that one word, love, because I think that helps us go viral with what I mean. And so I want to say the solidarity economy is based on love. Now, what's happened is our economy is a capitalist economy. So people think when I say economy, they think capitalism, they think Andrew Smith, they think lots of things if they study the invisible hand in economics. That's not what I'm talking about. That's a new version since the industrial age, maybe a little before, in terms of understanding ownership and control. Next slide. Actually, much of the philosophy I'm talking about really comes from indigenous people globally, but I'll speak to the indigenous people locally. The Haudenosaunee people in northern New York State put together a basic call to consciousness in 1977 to the UN. This is the cover page, an original piece of a pamphlet. They went to the UN and said, we have to consider 7 generations. That's the ancient way, and that should be the forever way. 7 generations for our decision-making. By contrast, a capitalist economy loves their quarterly reports. And let me just say, spit on that, because quarterly reports got us where we are today, which doesn't measure the kind of violence and extraction that we have in the world. I put another photo in that slide that says labor is entitled to all it creates. It's really our work in relationship to nature that makes the world go round. And that is part of what we're talking about here, is understanding that a solidarity economy is the word solidarity is the adjective for the kind of economy we can live in, and I even posit in some ways we already do. When we went through COVID and we lived through it, we showed up for each other in ways that people were like, wow, but that's ancient, and we did it from the day we were born and someone cared for us, unless we were unlucky enough not to have that care, I want to say, but generally speaking, we care for people. That's what family is, that's what community is, and when we put financial terms on it, it starts to become extracted rather than of solidarity and love. Next slide. So as Vandra mentioned, I grew up, that's a photo of me on the left, looking up to my mom at a demonstration at the United Nations on Mother's Day in 1962, probably. And understanding that the civil rights movement that's in the lived experience for many of us is one of many ways that we show up in solidarity. If we're not someone that's suffering under the terms and conditions that are negative, and we show up in solidarity, it really means we're in this together. Nobody is free until everybody is free. That's a quote from Fannie Lou Hamer, but it also is repeated in so many messages. When I tried to Google whose quote is this, I got many different versions, right? So I want to say that. The next slide, please. So this is a wonderful image that comes out of the disability justice community. And it simply says, nothing about us without us is for us. This is about respect forward, respect to our comrades wherever we are, friends, people we love. We don't solve problems for other people. We solve problems with other people. And we really put the most oppressed first as a way to say, tell us which way to go. So next slide. I'd like to channel nature. Like I say, channel love. Nature is all around us, and we know it connects all things, and actually we are part of it. So I say we're all connected, right? We're all connected. We're connected to nature, we're connected to each other. There's local, global, universal, natural, and spiritual. I want to really say that, like, we show up with each other from our heart. So this is a Sunday service that Vandra referenced Sundays at 11, we're non-theist. I'd say some of us are theists. I don't want to like say what you believe in the higher whatever. We believe in love and care for each other, just like those blades of grass that love and care for each other, just like the trees under the ground. The mycelium network functions. It's just been oppressed. So bringing it alive, we can really recognize that we're all connected, that we actually are one interspersed entity, and we need to move towards that. Next slide. This is a quote by Felix Adler. So not everybody here, the 15 or 20 in the room, the 30 on Zoom may not know that Felix Adler in the 1800s founded the American Ethical Union. He was trained to be a rabbi. So I have some identity with him through Judaism, that he was trained, he came from a family, generations of rabbinical studies, and he sort of said, no, it's not all that, it's about what we do. And he really took away the God idea and brought up the deed before creed idea. It says it's what we do, that's what makes us holy. So this quote, and I'll read it this time, but it's actually going to be shared later as well. The fact that there is spiritual power in us, that is to say, a power which testifies to the unity of our life with the life of others, which impels us to regard others as other selves, to regard others as other selves. This fact comes home to us even more forcibly in sorrow than in joy. It is thrown into clearest relief on the background of pain. So I have the chills. I inspire myself perhaps, but let me say this also really references for me what we went through as a world through COVID. And I will shout out to the pain that we collectively are feeling when we think of Gaza and the suffering there and any other suffering. When COVID happened and then George Floyd was murdered, the kind of togetherness that came to understand we're in this together against all this came forward. Of course, there's a lot to be said about what it is we need to do, but there's also a how we do it. So I want to show the next 3 slides kind of quickly to give you an idea. The children of the Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture, when we were cleaning out the building at 53 Prospect Park West, Ann Clayson gave these to me. These are 2 drawings made by my children. And this says, and this is one of my kids at the age of 5, bringing out the best in ourselves and thereby others. You know, children's program studying what we believe, and they do artwork on it. The next one is by Tyler, who's now on the board here. And he says, we appreciate the unique capacities in every person. And there he has a child cheering on a child in a wheelchair making a basket. This is just core stuff, right? We don't need all the dogma to understand. And this last slide is really important to me for the next one. And it's hard to see, but if you're in the house, you can go to the wall over there and see it. This is by Tara, Tachi and Luis's daughter, and she did it for the art show. And what she was saying, and I'm gonna have to go up close to say it, is no one is alone, together we fly, and there's more to it, but it really starts to say how we're all in this together, and she named it Entwined. And when I saw that, I just felt like that's exactly the point of this talk. We are entwined. What does it mean to be entwined? The next 3 slides, I'm going to move through fast, and I'd like you, Tachi, to go with me on that. I keep speaking to Tachi because she's on. Oh, no, before I go to the next 3 slides, this is a very important one. This is used a lot in social justice movements today. Some of you may be familiar with this image. And it says, you know, when we talk about equality and everybody gets the same, you see the kid with smaller stature still can't see what's going on behind the fence. And so equity looks like you give more stools to the shorter kid and everybody can see over the fence. The reality is that some people get all of it, and isn't that a shame? And other people are left not being able to see anything. But the full liberation of showing up for each other might be getting rid of the fence. So I want to really shout out to what a solidarity economy looks like is the adjective of taking care of our home is in solidarity, not in capitalism, not in inequity. And so the solidarity economy. Now what's happening, we'll go to the next slide for a second. I'm going to have to, I was on Zoom in order to help manage some of, my phone was also in the Zoom room in order to manage some of this, so I was distracted, and I'm sorry for that. These next 3 slides, I'm hoping that you'll each find something familiar there. Vokashi, I had to put it right up there, is Vandra's business for composting, which, by the way, the metaphor is right there. The composting is right there. There's no such thing as waste. We're all in this together. You have a wonderful meal, and then you put it back into the ground. These are local organizations, and I wanted to shout out to our new location on 4th Avenue versus Prospect Park West and say, look at all the wonderful caring that's going on in our community. Really look at these organizations are part of, I might also say, a caring economy. There's a lot to be said about nonprofit industrial complex. I'm not going to go there. There's a lot to be said about capitalism. I won't go into that today. We can save both of that for other conversations. The solidarity economy comes up somewhere in between that says whether you do it for a little profit, hopefully Vokashi gets some, or you do it with grants, you're showing up for people, you're part of this caring economy. Next slide. Other organizations in the community, you might recognize some of them, and I'm not going to name them all, but I just want to say I've, over the many years, can identify with each of them in different ways. The next slide. And I wanted to shout out to, we're closer to Red Hook than we were before up on Prospect Park West. There's a lot going on there. There's public housing closer to us now than on Prospect Park West. How do we relate to all this? But I want to just put a pin in what you see here. CENIC, Cooperative Enterprise Alliance of New York City, is part of something called the US Solidarity Economy Network. And CENIC put together this book called Seeding Solidarity, a website, and I think I've seen it printed in some ways. But I'm going to hand out QR codes to everybody in the room when you're done, so you can look more into these things, and you'll get links in the chat later. But this is who's doing a lot of the work. Networking, the US Solidarity Economy Network networks a lot of this thinking of how else do we show up for each other in a caring and a solidarity economy. Next slide. So this is something that I think is a fabulous visual, and you're not getting the full benefit of it on Zoom or in the room, but I'm going to tell you what it is. And again, I'll be handing out a link to this. It comes from an organization called Movement Generation, and it frames a strategy for a just transition. So many of us may have heard of and think about what we're doing with environmental injustice, climate injustice. How do we think about it? And there's a lot of talk about a just transition, or a Green New Deal, but I will say it's more than, and it includes environmental work. It's how we do the work. So in this image on the right, you see something called the extractive economy. It looks like militarism. It looks like extractive labor. It looks like what the different images are: government, money, how we work is in the middle, militarism. And in the middle, going up and down, is how you deal with the change locally, nationally, and globally. But the change is on the living economy, a different adjective for what I might also say a solidarity economy or a caring economy, a living economy that's generative, that gets us back. And really, we could do a whole talk on this, because what we think about a Green New Deal needs to really expand into this space. It expands into all these different things we can be doing, and I posit some of it we are doing. We're just buried because the system prefers us to be marginalized. And us is our loving spirit. Love is when we care for each other, and it's looked at as low-paid work. How dare that, right? So all of this ends up how we work, how we care, how we care for the planet, what kind of systems we build. Next slide. So this is in that image, and of course you won't see this. I wanted to bring out the idea of a values filter. We still need money, we still need to move things, and how do we use a value for that? And so a values filter gets us what we want to leave behind and what we want to take. Sometimes this is also referred to as resist and build. What are we resisting and what are we building? And there's a lot of things in what we have that we have to take with us, but how do we use a values filter? It often has to do with money, with exploitation, with respect. How do we value how we go forward? There's a lot to be said about the money use. I had a thought and I've lost my cards, which is really a drag. They're here somewhere. What's good to understand about a living economy and a functioning economy and what eco really means, care for our world, is that there are certain things we will always need. And I say food, care, and repair, and the distribution of those things. Food, care, and repair. Every society needs that. Every community needs food, care, and repair. Of course, it might look like school. It might look like farms. It might look like bringing food from other places. But food, care, and repair are the systems inside that we have to make work. And when we do that in a way that uses a values filter, we come up with something that could be defined not as a capitalist economy, but one as solidarity. Completely lost my thought. So I mentioned the resist and build. I think that's another way to really look at what we do. And what this does is it helps us realize, like, there's not a wrong way and a right way to go about the work of making more justice in the world. There are some things we have to resist. Let's go demonstrate. Let's go fight for a different government system, fight for, but also let's build. So I think it's important to pay attention to both of those things. Next slide. So some people, I noticed Gail Johnson in the room when I was on my phone watching, who was here. Shout out to Gail, who's a member of the New York City Network of Worker Co-ops. There may be others here as well. New York City Network of Worker Co-ops had a national convening. We brought people from all over the country to New York, and the New York Society for Ethical Culture hosted the final party. And this is outside with a banner. I guess you can't really see it very well on the slide, but we're outside the building of the New York Society, and the top photo shows that, has their logo. But the bottom one is a very, very long banner that tells the story of cooperative economics in New York. And it really goes back to, it goes further back, but it starts, what you can see here is the Black Panthers, when they started doing free food, free breakfast program. That's another expression of the solidarity economy showing up when you're fighting, but you're also building. And paying attention to that means that we can really be doing different things, whatever brings us joy or passion at that time in our life. How are we paying attention? This also shows other worker co-ops that have come to be. And in New York City, our government, our city government has put money out. I'm going to say between 1 and 3 million a year for the past 8 years. I think we might be hitting 10 years this year. That has gone to developing worker co-ops. So worker co-ops are how people work together cooperatively and what kind of businesses they create. Next slide. And when we talk about the solidarity economy, and I said it's about the food, the care, the repair, and it's how we exchange things. So another thing I often say about economy is that it is really the production and distribution of the stuff that we need. It doesn't have to be much more complicated than that. What do we need, and how do we make it and distribute it? So there's a lot of systems for that right now. This is an image that's hard to see, but I wanted to give you the idea, looking at what's created, what's produced, how it's exchanged, how it's consumed, what we do with surplus allocation. That's a very interesting thing there, because in the capitalist society, it's referred to as profit, and some people grab it. And we have something really perverse right now with how many, the few, but largely capitalized, rich, super rich people, and so many other poor. So surplus allocation says, how do we think differently? So this is an image to think about how we exchange stuff, how we make stuff, how we distribute stuff towards a more equal economy, a more just and caring one for solidarity. Next slide. This is another way to look at the typology of the solidarity economy. And what I like about it is if you can look at it closely, and again, we can share the deck if people want, or we can learn more about this in general, there's different ways to think that you already do this. So in alternative consumption, I see buying clubs. I'm part of a community-supported agriculture. Further down, I see mutual aid under alternative finance, right? A lot of us are supporting other people who are not as well off as ourselves, or being supported by people who have more resources as a way of mutual aid. That's a wonderful way to say, how do we show up for each other financially. And so that would fall under the alternative finance category. There's also banks and community development financial institutions that are dedicated to actually the money has to go back into the community. So this is a whole system, again, buried because the ruling class that runs things the way they like it under capitalism don't like this. They'll say, where's your return? Where's your quarterly return? And we have to force that conversation into the 7 generations and say we're building into a much deeper sense of return and allocation. I think I want to point out to this, a very important part on the far left is governance. Again, a whole nother conversation. But what does democracy look like when you take into account solidarity? It looks like something that might reference back to those that image of the four different images of the kids trying to look at the baseball game, right? What does governance look like if you give everybody the equal amount of access and then you still have people who can't be part of governance? So governance happens in a way that says, how do we really include people? So, very simply, closed captioning helps, having hybrid helps. These are examples. Going around and making sure everyone's heard. The society has just gone through a 6-month process with Better Outcomes Consulting that helped us really look at some of the processes we can use. That was just the tip of the iceberg of change, because we're going to have to do more on a regular as a community. And I know some people in the chat on Zoom and some in the room are members of the society, and we're going to have to do it here. And you can do it anywhere. How do you build systems that have governance and control that really are equal, anti-oppressive, anti-racist, anti-colonialist, showing up for everybody? Because if you just distribute it equitably according to like the same size platform, there's already too much historical oppression and inequality that you don't get there. So this governance is a very, very important part of the typology of solidarity economy. Next slide. Again, I mentioned this seeding solidarity mapping before, and I'm putting it here again, and you'll get links to this if you want them. Next. So what we build, this list is so incomplete. It's not intended to be complete, and it sort of shows you it's just me brainstorming in caps, okay? But basically, it's, we build cooperative businesses, we build mutual aid, community gardens, we compost, we're involved in land trusts, taking land trusts. For people who don't know, we did a platform a few years ago on this. It's about taking land out of the speculative market and saying the land is here, we're going to use it. It really harkens back to the indigenous way of what I will say. They stewarded land. They didn't own it, they didn't control it, they stewarded it. It's a different way to think about land. That's land trusts, unions, community-based organizations, public institutions. There's so much more that we build that I will also say, wherever you find yourself in your day job or your hobby, you can be building something that's cooperative, that's in solidarity. It really doesn't mean I have to join the movement. It's more like the movement is wherever we are. Families, family networks, an organization like this. Next. And how we build what we need. This is so important to process, that we make the change by going into it with a feeling of respect, of love, that we have processes and practices that really are inclusive, things like meetings where we might do breakouts in small groups, we might come back, we hear from everybody, recording this. These are like, how do we set up systems that really come from us and for us, by us? Compassion and care. That's another way we do it. There was a time in my life where I did nothing but take care of my sister at the end of her life. And that was so holy and that was so precious. And I gave up a part of my career at that time. But you know what? It was like totally feeling I am part of something much deeper. That mycelium network, I'm part of it. Culture, how we show up for each other. Having this art show here yesterday was a great celebration of culture. It was small, which made it intimate. I'd love to see it big too, but it's the idea that everybody contributes, everybody comes on in and enjoys each other's company, because joy really matters. And I have joy there. And the last word I put here was love. Again, a brainstorming of words for me, not all the things that would be included of how we build it, but how we build it is how we show up for each other. So next slide. This is a quote by Assata Shakur, and I'm going to read it for us now because it's hard for everybody to see it, perhaps. in the room especially. We need, and she spells the word revolution, R/evolution. So I'm going to say we need a R/revolution when I read this. We need an R/evolution of the mind. We need a R/evolution of the heart. We need an R/revolution of the spirit. The power of the people is stronger than any weapon. A people's revolution can't be stopped. We need to be weapons of mass construction, weapons of mass love. It's not enough to change the system. We need to change ourselves. We have to make this world user-friendly. And that's Assata Shakur. If people don't know her, she was known to be a revolutionary, Black Panther, living now in Cuba. And that's why it's important that she put R/revolutionary there, evolutionary, to understand we're making the change as we go. This is a big evolution for her and her public voice from how she was known in the 60s and 70s. So I want to really honor that evolution. There's a piece of artwork I did when I took a class at the Brooklyn Museum that we were supposed to bring forward female ethical heroes was sort of the theme of the class. And I did a piece on Assata, and it's hanging here. I'm going to turn to my last slide. Oh, actually, the next slide is the piece of artwork that's hanging here. Just a little self-promotion, but I'm not really an artist, except I can be artistic. So I did that. And the quote is there. And the next slide. I think I said, if I say nothing else, this is the word of the day, but maybe it's the word of what the economy really could be made of. Of course, some might say I'm very idealistic, but let me say, 7 generations from now, we will be thanked if we move in this direction. And that's nothing about idealism. So I want to really honor that space that we can be the change and think differently in every little way and every big way that we go about what we do. I'm going to end it there for now. I'm going to come back with an activity for all of us after, I think, right after the song? Great.
Love you, love you.
Oh, I'm going to, when I